Hello, this is Trey Ordway, and I'm presenting my group's project for the Altair Global Student Contest, where we will evaluate the impact of pollution emissions in Europe. For this project, we are assuming the role of a U.S. government aid organization tasked with helping reduce emissions in European countries. Our main goal is to identify which countries produce the most pollution, and once we identify them, we will analyze the data to understand what types of emissions are causing the most problems. With this information, we can provide targeted and effective aid to help the highest polluting countries improve their air quality. So steps to determine this. Run a decision tree, run a gradient boosting trees, analyze where pollution is most prevalent, and interpret results and identify a solution. So first, to determine which countries are most prevalent over the entire landscape of our emission data set, we ran a decision tree with the label being the specific country. So as you can see, starting at the top of the tree, we have our main emission sources. Some examples of these are manufacturing, waste, transportation, and agriculture. This then feeds into the location of these air quality stations, referring to rural, urban, and suburban areas. With this, we are able to evaluate how frequent specific countries appear and potentially where and how impactful they are under that particular category. With this, we determined that the most prevalent countries were France, Spain, and Austria. So here's France's model. To figure out where each of these three countries should focus their resources to reduce pollution, we ran gradient boosting trees. We started with France. This model looks at how air pollution varies across different types of monitoring stations in France. What we see is that stations near industrial areas, especially rural ones, tend to have noticeably higher pollution levels at about 0.20. In cities, even when a station is near industrial activity, the increase is much smaller at around 0.09. So here's Spain's model. This model includes air pollution levels across monitoring stations in Spain. Stations that are affected by energy industries or fugitive fuel emissions, such as power plants, refineries, coal dust, or gas leaks, tend to show slightly higher pollution levels at around 0.015. Even then, the more remote rural stations in these areas still stay relatively clean, with values between 0.037 and 0.053. On the other hand, stations where the main pollution sources come from things like traffic, heating, or agriculture consistently show that cleanest air overall at about 0.100. So here's Austria's model. This model looks at air pollution levels at monitoring stations. In Austria, stations located near industrial processes like factories tend to show higher pollution levels at around 0.083, especially in rural or regional areas. Stations that are farther away from industrial activity have much cleaner air at around 0.046, and the cleanest stations are usually in urban and suburban areas that do not have industrial emissions at about 0.031. So, in conclusion, our analysis uses decision trees and gradient boosting models, has highlighted France, Spain, and Austria as the countries most prevalent in our emissions data set. For France, industrial areas and rural regions show the highest pollution impact, while cities are less affected. In Spain, energy-related industries slightly raise pollution, but rural stations remain relatively clean, and traffic or agriculture areas are the cleanest. In Austria, industrial activity drives higher pollution in rural regions, while urban and suburban areas without industrial influence maintain the lowest levels. These insights can guide targeted aid efforts to reduce emissions most effectively.